We're here to teach you to rise and grind, to get that bread. We know that a lot of you guys are feeling down, feeling like you're being cut out of this economy. Maybe people have told you to learn to code, but don't worry, right? The problem is your lack of motivation, and we're here to motivate you to make that money. We're selling skincare products. I have some in this cup. You'll glow like the sun by wearing this. So buy a bunch from us, get into debt, and sell it to your friends. Commercialize your this is right. Yeah, commercialize your relationships.
Commodify your relationships.
New polity.
we practiced that.
Oh boy, sorry.
So maybe actually a first place to start is actually talking about what money is, even before we talk about how to use it.
Okay. Can I guess?
Yeah.
Money is that feeling you get when you can just do anything.
That's closer than, yeah, I'd like to admit.
Okay, go ahead. What's money? Tell me.
Well, money traditionally is like changes throughout time. It's not one thing. And this is something that people really need to understand, is that there's not an essence of money that existed and manifested itself in the Roman period as it does today, and the Micronesian island of Yap, where they roll around giant stones for their money. Like huge stones, like 6 feet tall. Like that's their money.
That would drastically inconvenience Jeff Bezos. Yeah. I think we should instigate the giant rock. Now, there's thinkers that say that money is an essential, like an essence. Like it's always.
Yeah.
That seems a little freaky.
It is a little freaky. Okay. But I do think that is in our kind of common MO as well. And just the average person who doesn't really think about money would look back in history, or even if they were to sit down, they would try and start guessing at what money is instead of saying, oh, wait, which type of money? Mm-hmm. And that really does matter a lot. Whether you have something that's unregulated by the government and is just metal, or shells, or these stones, or if it's something that is utterly like a figment of the state's imagination that we all play along with, which is what we have now. We call that fiat money or debt money because it's worthless. It absolutely is worthless. If people didn't want to take it because the state said that it was good to pay off, it was legal tender to pay all debts, then we would never have it. Ever. So
there's a difference between money that's made efficacious by our agreement versus money that's made efficacious by the fact that the state says it's valuable.
Yeah, but you can even say that some things have value in and of themselves. Sure. I mean, I would say that about gold actually, but not so. I don't want to make it out to say like gold is something so mysterious and special. I just think it's really pretty.
It is.
Yeah. And it is one of those things
that's why we make tabernacles out of gold rather than green paper.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure somebody's trying.
But it also gets us to what, we've kind of put together a few rules for money. And our first rule for money, for how they use money, is to always know what money's for. If money is a placeholder for something else, then always know what money is holding a place for.
Right, absolutely. Because otherwise the money becomes the thing itself, right? I mean, this is just classic miserliness. I mean, we all pretend like it's just something that other people indulge or have. But if money really is just a brief representation, then the thing that it's supposed to represent should shine through it. We should look at $100 and think immediately of food.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Whereas I think that money has this way of making the real world seem secondary. Yeah. Like, well, it's food, or maybe it's fun, or maybe it's gas, or maybe it's nothing at all. Maybe it's savings, maybe it's spending. And it's just like the real world dissipates and the thing you're left with is the paper.
And so it all becomes savings.
Right.
And it all becomes capital too. I mean, this is something, again, I don't want to make this too complicated. And I don't think it is. I mean, I think this is very important, is that the scholastics, medieval Christians, had this distinction between regular money and capital. Meaning in the first case, it was just a medium of exchange. It was something that you were going to spend, to get rid of, to exchange for a real good in the real world. Whereas capital was something that was going to go into a new venture so as to get more money back, or is to build up that venture with the hope of getting some more money back, that you could do it again and again and then have more. And then, but this is the important part, is that you actually had to register part of that money, whatever amount that was going to be, with the lords, so as to say, this is no longer just regular money.
Oh, wow.
This is actually meant for capital. So it's treated differently.
Wow.
And today we don't have that legal distinction, let alone that distinction in our minds.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
And so money really does become just about anything at all.
Yeah. But what I've noticed is that people really don't seem to do very interesting things with their money.
Oh my gosh.
Besides to either make more of it, which is boring because it's just, that's what you're already doing, man. Like, but in a real way, I look at like the rich in our society, like the people that have money, and I feel kind of bad for them because they live in the society which basically limits what they do with their money to just getting bigger versions of what people that don't have money already get.
Dude, it's so true.
No, like you go into like a slightly more upscale community, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's got a gate. Maybe there's a guy at the gate, and you drive around, you start looking at the houses, and you're like, wait a minute, this is the same, like, you know, basic framed, sided, painted by Lowe's house. It's just really big, right? It's the same yard. The yard's just bigger. It's the same car. The car is just a little bit bigger and nicer. And even the restaurants, it's like you have a scale of restaurants that you can eat at, but the point is that you're all eating the same.
It's still a restaurant.
It's the same sort of distributed food.
Yeah,
like, or
even if, you know, you start to make a bit more money, and so you start going to Kroger's or QFC, and you start going to Whole Foods instead. It's the same distribution process. You're in the same mode, the same order of living.
Right.
So I totally agree with that, and I've seen a lot of friends who, once they get their raise, you know, they stop paying mortgage on their current, you know, 2,000 square foot home, and they start paying mortgage on their bigger 3,000 square foot home.
Right.
And so there is this huge lack of creativity. I mean, but that lack of creativity goes all the way up to the top. Look at Warren Buffett, you know, once the world's wealthiest man, still worth something close to around $100 billion. You know, he said that he should be taxed more than other people. And maybe that's, you know, right. But it certainly demonstrates a lack of creativity when he just goes ahead and gives his money away, his charitable money away, to government-sponsored projects at the end of each year. I mean, Planned Parenthood is the biggest one.
Right.
But it's just the old question that we always asked ourselves: what would you do with a winning lottery ticket? What would you do with $1 million? Yeah. It's like we all have the same kind of inane answer to that. Is, well, I would buy a cool home. I would get a cool car.
Yeah.
I would go on some sweet vacations.
Yep.
I would save up for my kids' college fund, and I would save the rest, invest the rest, and maybe give some to charity.
Give some to charity. But what charity? Yeah. Do you even know what charity? Sure.
I mean, that's pretty tough.
Yeah.
That's pretty tough.
Yeah.
So I think that what the church needs to focus on in this age of money is not just, you know, how can we ensure that the lower classes are being able to budget better and figuring out how money actually works, and the middle class stop wasting their money and getting up to their eyeballs in debt with houses and cars to the point where they feel like they don't have any money anymore. And for them even to relearn how the budget, instead of saying at the end of each month, you know what, we just don't have the funds for this. Instead of course you have the funds for this. You have $50, $60, $70, $100,000 in the bank right now. You just have been told to save up for retirement. So you're not doing anything fun with your money or important with your money. I use those terms interchangeably. But also, like, actually instructing the rich to be true bearers, good stewards of their money, which means not maintaining it, but spending it really well.
Which is the point. It's for other people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the whole point of owning anything at all, is that you own things for others, for the sake of others. We own our house. And this is, my son's godfather always says that the reason why that God gives you a house is to fill it with other people, and he doesn't just mean multiplying your own family, which he's done a phenomenal job of, but also filling up your house with those who need it, which he's done an equally phenomenal job of. Everybody from homeless moms living in their cars in parking lots to, recovering addicts to abandoned kids. This family's pretty amazing. Yeah. To me, even, to wayward Oxonian students. But it's, this was that starts to get at the understanding of what private property is for. And as money is private property for some time, even though it circulates so frequently, it is still for, your family and then for others. It's always for others.
What he means by that is he's advising people to get out of debt. And he's saying something like this. To save, right? But his point, because it's a Christian message, or he's attempting to be one, is that if you can save now, right, and if you can get rid of your debts now, then
stockpile a lot of cash now.
Then later, you will be able to give. Use the term "give" like no one else. You will be able to bless others with your money. You've heard this sort of talk. I think it's more popular in Protestant circles. Catholics,
no. Catholics fall prey to it too. But I think that's right. You do hear it a lot more in Protestant circles. And the idea is just generally like, oh, I'm young now, I got to save up my money. Oh, I just can't wait to be generous when I'm old. But now when I have my whole life ahead of me and I don't know what my money is going to be for, then I should just have it so that I have it for anything.
Well, right. What Jacob's saying is like, the trouble with the mentality is that it doesn't build a habit of giving and a habit of spending from the beginning. Now, with habits of soul, we'll do some very brief one-on-one stuff, right? A habit is a power of the soul, so something that we're capable of. And we build that capacity through action, right?
It's disposition, if you want to think about it kind of really simply.
In mind, to bless others in particular. And this is the way I think that the virtue of beneficence is really about being an image of God.
Yeah.
God is the one who blesses us, right? He only does good. It's really hard for us to grasp this because all of our examples are broken human people that sometimes do good. But God isn't like that. He's the one that always unceasingly does good, right? Yeah. And we are supposed to imitate that. And the reason that it's considered as one of those virtues that moderates the use of money is because it gives, and not just money, wealth, right? But
that's an important distinction we'll talk about in a second.
But it just gives it all its positive direction.
Yeah.
And it reinforces what we've said before, that it is sinful, it is wrong, it lacks beneficence to save money if all you're doing is saving money.
Right.
Right? Because it doesn't have that positive good. What you're essentially doing is not being evil with your money, right? But as we've already said, that's totally insufficient. And in fact, especially it becomes very clear with money, right? Because what is it to not spend $100,000, right? It's to deprive others of it as a source of wealth.
And we even say that about, what is it? It's scandal. It's scandalizing because you hear about these crazy dinners. People went out and they spent, $6,000, $7,000, $27,000 on dinner, and you just get scandalized by it, or use $100 bottle cooking wine, and you get scandalized by hearing that.
You have different friends. I've never heard this. But I would be scandalized.
Yeah. And so these are, but it's not wrong to say, some people say, well, we've made that money, so we have the ability to use it how we want. And that's just not how our Christian cosmos is set up. God created it in a certain way. If we're not living in accord with the way that he created it, then we are actually being unjust, doing ill,
even if
hurting people. I will name names. If you go online to the major investment portfolios for Ave Maria investments. What's number one on their list? Visa, a usury company. Like the church has condemned this for how many years? Like since the beginning. The Council of Nicaea, where Jesus was proclaimed to be fully man, fully God, also condemned usury. And it's like, that's a Catholic investment firm. What about the Knights of Columbus? What do they have for their retirement accounts?
That's two names.
That's two names.
Google.
Google's on there.
Alphabet, Inc. Yeah.
Amazon's on there. I mean, the destruction of the proper middle class, the ownership class, is absolutely abolished by the investments of Catholics. And then you even have to go even further back, even beyond this, and say, why do we even have a type of stock market in the way that we do? It's you don't have the ability to put money into these companies because you really believe in what they're doing, because you want to like give them some money to continue their mission,
to do good.
Yeah, you want them to make you money.
Right.
It is a medium for greed. It's the same thing of saying, I want to have this money so that I just have more of it.
You're blowing my mind because you're blackpilling me. You know that thing? Because I'm realizing I can critique Google, don't be evil, but that's essentially what we want out of so-called Catholic investing. Like, what do I want? Well, I want a company that's going to invest my money for me, and they're going to avoid porn and abortion and all the bad things that I don't like.
Yep.
It's like, buddy, that's okay. That's a mitigation of an evil, sure. But you are wide open for sins of omission, because what are you doing? You're saying like, okay, essentially you're saying that there's some things that are really bad that I want to avoid, but you're still investing money without actually knowing what it's doing.
Yeah.
Like you're right back to this lack of personal virtue. You're right back to this systems will take care of my money for me. And your motivation, you're right, is entirely the money that you get back and not at all the activities of the company itself. I mean, if you can look yourself in the eye and say, hey, I'm making good returns on my investments because Amazon is thriving. If you as a Catholic can look yourself in the eye and say like, I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing God's holy work, like, I mean, I don't know what to say to you.
Ill-formed. I would look you in the eye and say you are ill-formed.
Sure. Yeah, and that's really, I think, really important, because Aquinas says that at least prodigality gets what money is, because it's for spending.
Right.
So, okay, yeah, the prodigal is imprudent. He might even be evil, and usually his actions tend towards all sorts of other vices, like this kind of, like laziness, luxury, all these problems.
Licentiousness.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you got to say, at least he's taking this money and burning it. Like it's being put to use, right? Even if it's thoughtless use and all this critiques. Whereas the covetous man isn't treating money as money at all. He's actually in a kind of unnatural relationship. More like sodomy than like.
Ooh.
Anyways.
Yeah, it's true though. And even St. Thomas says that prodigality is more easily reformable. Like if you are prodigal, then it's easier to tend towards liberality because you are able to release yourself from money.
Yeah.
But you just need to be more, you need to be thoughtful about it. You need to be holy in your releasing of money. Whereas with covetousness, it's just so blasted hard to unhabituate somebody towards this false sense of prudence.
Sure.
Where they're caring more about their temporal life than their eternal life, where they care more about this false sense of security for themselves than caring for their neighbor.
Well, and especially,
but I want to talk about our town, right?
Yeah.
Because like, look, you can rag on conservatives for being heartless all you want, but it is a legitimate, actual problem that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are habituated into just being children under the state.
Oh man.
And like to deny this because of some kind of like recognition of their dignity, I think is foolish, because the dignity, it's true that like that is not what they are. And people do fall in hard times and people do need assistance, yada, yada, yada. But man, when we look at our welfare systems, we're talking about the maintenance of a perpetual renting class. We're talking about people who are trained and born into second and third generations of families that have deep dependence, to the point where like I talk with some of my friends who are in this situation here in our town, and the greatest pride they have is in the maintenance of never working, of always being able to get disability and unemployment assistance in order to maintain a lifestyle that frankly is childish. Like it tends to revolve around video games and such.
Yeah.
And it's not like this kind of reactionary thing to say that this is a real problem. And it really weakens, I think, the leftist case when they pretend like this doesn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Generally, we associate the giving of alms with that's a good person. But what you're telling me is actually it's the prerequisite. It's a prerequisite that you be a bad person. And in fact, when we see almsgiving, we should say to ourselves, there goes a sinner on his way to God.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, that's revolutionary. That's a revolutionary term.
Yeah. And so and maybe even to help understand this a little bit more is that the vice that opposes the virtue of almsgiving is,
Nope.
it's envy.
Really?
Yeah. Envy is the opposing vice. And so who is the envious man par excellence? Well, that's Cain, because he sees his brother getting to heaven.
Yeah.
Abel giving the proper sacrifice to God that's not just the bloody sacrifice that is giving up life, that is tantamount to his own life, as people see symbolically, allegorically in the Old Testament, but also with a heart full of praise.
Mm-hmm.
And he is envious of it. Now envy's tricky because it's not just covetousness where you are looking at what others have, but you're looking at the other who has.
So where that desire to merit with God, which was just instilled in medieval Christendom, which was cultivated, which formed like the basis of the way people walked and talked and the things they did on the weekends, it doesn't just dissolve and go away once you're like, oh, actually we don't merit. No, it becomes applied to this material world. Mm-hmm. And you see this very obviously in the rise of capitalism, that what we now merit in is money.
Yeah.
What we now strive for is money. Mm-hmm. What we now put that kind of in, and it works because money, like God, has a certain infinity to it, right? Like,
absolutely.
As a number, it means that you can always think of a greater number. Sure. Now, this would be totally reductive to talk about God in this way, and that's what idolatry is. It's always a reduction of who God really is. Like when we say the infinity of God, we shouldn't think of you can always put another hat on God's head.
Yeah.
But you can, but that's not the point. Sorry, just muddying the waters here. So that drive to amass, right, becomes capitalism. Merit becomes a matter of how much you own. Holiness, right, which is that amassing a treasure store, really does become, in American society, you can sort of track this, associated with being wealthy here on earth, right? So you really at some point know that you're one of the blessed because you have amassed material things.
Is that money has a quantifying function, right? Which is different than the world, which everything is qualitative. Everything is something. God didn't create a faceless, nameless thing, quantity. He created stuff.
This is the thing about money, is that it quantifies what is inherently qualitative. It takes that beautiful coffee mug that you love so much in the early morning that gives you hope and inspiration for the rest of your day, and it turns it into something that costs $6.99. Mm-hmm. And that $6.99 can be equated to anything else. A cheap book that you get at a used bookstore is also $6.99. And all of a sudden, two unlike things are likened to one another. And really what it truly and fundamentally does, it commensurates the incommensurable. It says that shirt and that lamp, which are nothing the same, are all of a sudden the same in terms of number value. It really wipes the face of something away.
Yeah, which is, you begin to understand why in kind of the ancient Jewish reflection on these things, they generally gave money a bad rap.
When we hear the term redemption, today we think he did do that. Like we owed 10.99 to the father, and he gave, a full $11. That's not what happened. Redemption in the ancient world meant the freedom from your debts. That what you owed you no longer owed. Why? Because it was not so much that your master was freeing you, but rather that somebody was taking you from the hand of your master. Israel was redeemed from Egypt, from Babylon, from Assyria. We were redeemed for God, being clutched out of the hands of the devil.
So just to be really clear, you're saying that what redemption originally meant was not the payment of an equivalent sum, like I'm going to pay this debt that you owe, but actually a freeing from a creditor? Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Now, that doesn't mean that we are... Now, what part of our redemption does that relate to? Of our salvation does that relate to? It doesn't relate to us still having to owe God something.
Okay.
We absolutely do. That's why we had to unite with Christ's sacrifice so that we might make a perfect oblation in and through him.
I mean, when you think about a marriage, I don't know. I wouldn't presume to know anything about your marriage. But from what little I know about my marriage, it certainly doesn't mean that we're not I'm not involved in still owing my wife and vice versa.
Absolutely. And that is so essential. What this part of salvation speaks to is that we are no longer slaves to sin, but slaves to righteousness. We are no longer under the ownership of the devil, but of God. He defeated the strong man, not by paying him off or anything like that, but by giving away out of our iniquity, so that we might make that perfect oblation, so that we might actually be able to fulfill that debt. But this is kind of the next part of the whole puzzle piece is what is debt and how can it be repaid?
Debt is the feeling. Debt's when I owe you $10.
But that is part of a money mechanism. That's what I want to suggest.
Okay.
I don't think, so we've talked about this before, that money makes two unlike things equal to one another. It commensurates what is inherently incommensurable. It makes the dinner table worth $100 and the lawnmower cost $100. And so thereby, through the measure of money, they're equal. And I think because we get so habituated to money, we just think that debts can be forgiven perfectly. Not just reciprocally, but there's a real reimbursement that is fundamental to reality. So what's the difference there? I think there's something, and we'll talk about this more, that is appropriate in our response to being given something good. But that can't be equal. Reimbursement, the word actually itself just means going again to your purse. I mean, that's like where it is in bursa, from Latin. That is an artificial term.
Right.
But
it can only be true with money that you could actually have that.
Yeah. But I want to make the case more fundamentally that gift is what allows for the entire money system to operate. I want to make the case that debt is not something to be paid back, but rather to respond to.
Interesting.
Yeah. I would like to argue alongside Mark that money makes us more predictable. And I would like to say that does so in a way that is apparent but not real, and then a way that is hidden and real.
Groovy. So how does money make us more predictable?
Well, the first thing that people probably will think of here is that once you have money, which is something that can be used universally, other than say like a watermelon, which can be used for like gifting and eating, that you would like the more universal good. And so this develops into
right.
a profit motive.
Money
a profit motive. Money creates the desire for it. I mean, Kierkegaard talks about this. He's sort of being a little bit mystical, but he says, in the end, all men will come to desire is money, because it is exchangeable for anything.
Yeah.
And it seems like a shell game, right? That we're saying, well, the reason that you become more predictable when you use money and when a society uses money is because money becomes the thing that is desired. So anyone who's looking at a money society can always predict that what people will do will ultimately be for the sake of more money rather than less.
Yep.
You create essentially the framework in which people operate, but you also create the end for which people operate.
Yep.
And this, to me, I mean, I make a joke of this because sometimes when I'm pretending that I can do like business meetings or something, I say, okay, our beginning assumption here is that everyone wants more money rather than less. So what should we do? But it's actually true, right? You can actually say like, well, if we could put more money here, we would get this result because people definitely want money, right? You think about like, okay, we have to take a neighborhood of people, and what we must do is remove them completely, like annihilate their neighborhood so we can put in, I don't know, a pipeline, a highway.
Yep.
And you say, goodness, what powers of prediction could we possibly utilize to find the one thing that will get people to actually move from their community? What could possibly destroy the power of community? But the trick is that you already know the answer. So you go and you give each person the check and you say, you're moving now.
Yeah. So I think really the place to start is with St. Thomas's 3 criterion for a good investment. This comes out of Secunda Secundae, questions 77 and 78, if anybody's wondering about that. But his 3 things are, one, that it has to be for the common good. It has to be truly a risk so that you are actively involved, like a true owner in the investment. And then the third thing is that you have to work for it. And if you can't work for it, if you're too old or something of that sort, then you have to pray for it, which of course means that you have to be investing in an endeavor worth praying for. So those are the 3 things. Now, when we can apply those investment criterion to real estate still, I think. And the long and the short of it is, well, it really depends on where you are and what are the needs of your city. So full disclosure, Mark and I both have rental properties. In the case, mine's not in this country. His is in this country.
It's in this country.
What's that?
I can throw a pebble at it from my house.
You
have to get a drone to strike your property.
Well, that often happens in that region, isn't it? Yeah.
That's a bad joke. All right.
So that's just full disclosure. We won't really talk about our properties, but it's just so you know, we're not saying anything.
It's a lovely 1940s home. Okay, I'm done. Yeah, and there.
How much? And you need to rent it out again. How much does somebody? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. The long and short of it is does somebody need to rent? Who needs to rent?
Right.
We're going to talk in this podcast about the renter society at one point, but just to hit full on, who are the people in society that actually need to rent? And I think the quick and easy answer is that those who don't intend to be in that place for very long.
Yeah, I mean, the first part, the first thing you need to recognize before saying, I'm going to go into real estate, is that for the Catholic, you have to believe in the church's teaching, which is that all labor is orientated towards productive ownership and ownership generally, which means that rent as such can only be a temporary, preliminary, and unfortunate, really, situation. You know, okay, so we all made it. We're all saints. We're holy. Hurrah. Who rents from who? Ridiculous. No one rents from anyone. Every man has his fig tree and sits under it. Right? This is the eschatological ideal that has to guide our practical work. And one of the problems with investment in real estate is that what it can tend to do is tend your heart towards desiring permanence of your renters, right? So wanting their situation of rent to be their lives. And that I think is depraved. So what you have to ask is like you were saying, what situations are actually impermanent such that they justify an impermanent situation? Because there is an evil in irresponsible ownership, right? Like there, you can see that too. Although often where you the most often see irresponsible ownership is in people buying up properties and then renting them out. So like their ownership is already secondhand. But there are some situations in which it'd be difficult for someone within their current vocation or office to rent or to own. So I'm thinking about students going to universities for a very short amount of time. I'm thinking about people that just need a halfway point between places if they're, moving from one place and looking for another.
Yep, exactly.
So
diplomats, that's my excuse.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think it's worth asking, like if you are investing in property and your point is to make money off of rents, well, first of all, you can't do that, because you can't be guided by profit purely. You have to be solving a particular problem for people and for your society at large. One of the questions to ask any potential renter is, what's your plan for owning? How do we get you out of this?
Yeah. So then,
did you know, friends, that it is a sin to charge interest on a loan?
Yep.
Wow. That is something that, I'll be honest, when I was first really getting into my faith, one of the things that inspired me was the claim I could make that the Catholic Church's teachings have never changed. That amped me up. Like in high school, I was like, that is so awesome.
Yep.
Thousands and thousands of 2000s of years of tradition. and I could look, at the prots, these poor little, I'm sorry, that was mean. You guys are great. And I could say, oh, you poor kids. You have a changing and changeable tradition. It ebbs and it flows, but I am on the rock of Peter. And then you know what someone told me to deflate my balloon, my triumphalist balloon, which is a pretty cool balloon. A lot of yellow and white.
Swirls and spectacles.
They said, actually, the church's teaching has changed. Don't you know that the church changed its teaching on usury? And therefore, and this is really important, because this isn't just like oh, here's an interesting church teaching. This is one of the primary claims by which people doubt the reality and truth of the Catholic faith, because they point to it and they say, oh, no, you are not some kind of Holy Spirit protected, guaranteed against the gates of hell from any wishy-washy doctrine. No, you're just like the rest of us. You've got a thing that you once said and now you walked it back and you don't say it anymore. And it was, again, I didn't really have a good understanding of like doctrinal development or anything. So I had actually no defense. It was really crushing to be like, oh man, well, what does this mean for me? Like, did the gates of hell prevail against the church? Were we wrong? Were we preaching the wrong thing? And so to meet a group of radicals later on in life and realize that was just wrong to ever say that usury was changed. The world did change, and the church has a real bad habit of trying to cozy up with the world. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it is no longer a sin to charge interest. Yeah. So Jacob, take it away. What's usury? Usury
is the charging of money on a loan of money.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's charging money, charging for the use of money.
Yeah.
The idea that Noonan had was that just because I just want to like clear this up really quickly, because the church offices stopped having people say, this is a productive loan that I'm giving to versus an unproductive loan that I'm giving to. So the difference between towards a new business venture versus the buying of a house, one that will continue to make money and be productive for society, versus another one which will inevitably just cost more money to keep fixing up, is that difference between capital in the venture and just money for purchasing. And the church actually made people like siphon their money off in certain corners and say at a certain point, like, this money is specifically capital. And that stopped happening in the 19th century, I think it was. Maybe it was 18th century. I can't actually remember now. But really just because there's that de facto change. Of course, what was happening then? Well, the church didn't really have any temporal authority at that point either. And people started to convert away from the faith. And therefore, they stopped listening to Holy Mother Church to be able to see how they should be ruling the temporal order. So that's really what happened.
Okay.
So it's a de facto change,
Yeah.
rather than something that changed de jure, and certainly not in terms of morality. But the first condemnation of usury you find in Leviticus, even, where God says, do not charge your brother interest for his loan. So when he falls in a hard time, you give him a loan, and don't you dare ask for more money back than you gave.
That's right.
Because that's evil, vile, and wrong. Usury is condemned in Leviticus. It's reaffirmed in Deuteronomy is condemning that. It's explained by Jesus Christ in the Gospels for that only hard-hearted people do this. And even it's described as being like the bank, the trapezein, the table that is mentioned, the bank where you, so why wouldn't you just put my money in a bank? If you thought I was a hard-hearted man, why wouldn't you just put it in a bank where it's explicitly, gaining interest, charging usury? That word is also used for the tables that Christ flipped over in the temple of the money-changing Pharisees. And he says, it's really, his point is, if you think, how can you think that I would ever be so morally corrupt as the Pharisees whose tables I overturned?
Yep.
That's what's going on.
That's the parable of the talents, baby.
In a nutshell.
That rules.
So value. So we've talked about this a little bit, where you have the threefold definition of money today. The way most scholars talk about money is that it's a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and it's a store of value. And for the scholastics, the only point of money was that it was a medium of exchange. It was only then secondarily a unit of account, and only tertiary a store of value. And it was only a store of value because, well, it might be a few days until you use it up, and it can't, like bread, go moldy after a couple of days. But what usury does is that it turns it around. It puts the store of value as the first aspect of money, because it's using time as the thing that you are charging for.
Okay, walk me through that like I'm 6 years old.
So, hi, little Marky. How are you doing today?
Well, if I'm 6, I'm playing Pee-wee soccer. I'm a little bit overweight.
Ooh, sorry, man.
But thanks.
This idea is that when you give out, so you have a student loan.
Yeah, I do.
Every month you have to make a payment on it.
When I'm feeling generous.
every
yes,
month.
I do. Yeah.
And historically, you'd find this changes a lot, but there was a common 12% annual interest rate. A percentage a month. Your loan goes up that you have to pay on. This is, in a sense, you are charging for every month that you are lending your money.
Yeah.
That for that month, that is worth 1% more.
Right.
So you are literally charging, a month is a time unit.
Yeah.
You're literally charging time.
I see.
Time is sacred.
Right. So like the thing that I'm buying is time.
Yeah. So in a sense, this is simonial, and
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like it's the sin of
Don't
simony.
Yeah. Let's do the take.
I think that's exactly right. And when you find that in Acts, the beginning of the book, when it's declared that all the Christians were living together, holding their goods in common, it's declared that there were no poor among them.
Wild.
So, which is kind of this extraordinary fulfillment of the Deuteronomical prophecy that said, if you follow these commands and live with your brother according to the law, there will be no poor among you.
Be good.
And finally, what's the fulfillment of the law? Well, it's grace. It's the life in the Spirit. It is also the life without fear and without poor. I mean, there's a reason why fear and love are antithetical to one another. I mean, fear and hope are antithetical to one another on one front, but so is fear and love. Is that it? And the fact that when Thomas speaks about fear being ultimately fulfilled or to completely defeated in love, I guess the Bible does that too. That you have you have no longer a system that's opposing God, but a system that is living in God and through God.
What's a 401k? How did we get here so we can know where to go?
Yeah. Well, 401ks are the most popular retirement plans in America today. 32% of Americans have them. So yeah, it's just about a third, but that is almost 60% of all employed Americans.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of an important stat. So while it's kind of a strong minority overall, it's a very strong majority as it pertains to the working class. And the 401k is really, in my mind, I see it as kind of a consummation of the retirement plans that emerged during modernity.
Okay.
So during the Middle Ages, you just did not have retirement plans at all. You had friends. So that's really the thing. You had family, you had productive property, you had the expectation that you are going to be taken care of, because naturally you have these stages in life where as a baby you need to be taken care of, as an old man you need to be taken care of, and in the middle you take care of both the younger and the older. And the same assumption really holds true today. It's just whether or not you know the people who are taking care of you in your old age or not. That's kind of one of our truisms about money that we mention all the time, is that money takes the place of where love lacks. As it comes to retirement, we still need to be taken care of. There's no way around it. It's just whether or not we know the people who are really taking care of us,
Sure.
or whether we're paying somebody else
Sure.
to do it. And so the 401k, the retirement plan, is really one such way. So to do that, to not be a burden on people that we know, and to rather be able to pay people that we don't know to take care of us. One, and then two, to be able to stop working earlier. And we've kind of already discussed an idea of retirement in an earlier podcast. And so anyways, this is kind of getting too tangential, long-winded, but all to say, in the Middle Ages, you didn't have a retirement account. And the first time that idea emerged again is in Bismarck's Germany.
You said emerged again. What do you mean?
I mean that there were, in a sense, retirement plans, and that was that I know of, at least, is in the Roman, the imperial times of Rome, when people were welcomed to join the army and kind of enticed to do so, with the provision that the empire would take care of them once they were too old to fight.
Gotcha.
They would give you land, they would give you a house, they give you money to have your servants and enjoy your freedom, quote unquote.
Sweet empire.
Yeah. And that's exactly how retirement plans, quote unquote, returned in modernity.
Gosh.
Bismarck wanted to bring all the principalities of Germany together. He needed a strong army to do so. He enticed more people to join that strong army, or to make that army strong, by encouraging them to join with a retirement plan.
Makes sense.
So one of the aspects of the 401k is that you don't have the funds until you turn a certain age.
Yeah, right.
So when you and it is a kind of a choice of when you pull out on these things, but when say you hit 62 years old.
Okay.
And at 62 is the first time you're actually able to touch your money without some sort of penalty and tax on top of it, extra tax.
Awesome.
At least that's what they call it, if you pull out your money early.
Yeah.
So in a real sense, you are saying to somebody else, you can use this. I'm loaning you my own money for what to invest in a certain set of companies.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes you don't have a full choice over what those companies are. And at that point, you don't have the control over your own money.
That idea that the Christian life is something that you do after a period of formation is just wrong, right? Like there are periods of formation, but it's formation through act, right? You act so as to form habits. You don't you don't do alternative actions like, okay, by studying and thinking, I'm then going to become really good at applying and acting. It doesn't work like that. You have to do it. So the point of the 401k, the problem, one of the problems with the 401ks is that you're habituated to put money away for later, to give later, to help later, to be magnificent later, to be liberal later. And this is a real problem because it's not like when you finally arrive at later, you arrive as one habituated in those virtues. No, you arrive kind of as an infant in the virtuous life. And this is something we talked about in the retirement, in our concern with the retirement generally, is that what you practically see in retirement is not people being virtuous. And I'm talking about Christians here. You do not see a lot of Christians who retire with a big lump sum of money and that they're just getting dividends off of and are becoming saints. What you see is that they become like Jimmy Buffett fans, like, is that Margaritaville or Cheeseburger in Paradise? I forget. I'm thinking of like boats, No offense to Jimmy Buffett. My point is simply this: it's not actually building up virtue. And I think the 401k is one of those ways where we are habituated to save our magnificence for later, right? And then that later never arrives. And I think that's problematic. And it's also socially problematic because it basically cuts off a whole class of people from ever ascending to real positions of power where they can do good. They just don't have a lot of power. They're stunted. Magnificence isn't just like showy, just a way of like doing something big and flashy that everyone admires you for, though it is also that. It is taking a moment of real power to change the world, right? And if Christians are not able to do that because they're worried about taking too much out and getting a tax hit, well, then you have a lot of Christians that aren't going to change the world, and that's sad.
Oh, I guess, how many problems have we mentioned?
Well, you said it inaugurates a new relationship to money, fear. And then
it certainly does.
And then it also creates blind investing as a norm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then it makes a globalized world.
As a result. That's right.
That is a result. It
but if that wasn't the case, we're talking about the 401k itself. Okay, so now I work with my guy, I've got a plan, it's just investing in companies that aren't doing evil things, but it's the same structure. Is there a problem? Are we just saying that the 401k is a good tool that's currently being utilized for bad ends?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. I really want to make sure that this is clear. Is that, well, what if you had one like Christian group that really does a great job trying to figure out what companies will really help the common good, that really need the money, and that will really change society? What happens then? And I mean, at that point, I would say there's a few different things that I would actually say. But the first is, let's just look at the structure of the 401k. Anyways, if you can't get your money out until later in life, A, and B, you can't, well, that's actually a little tricky. If you can't, that might be okay in and of itself. Let's just talk about that problem, because those companies might need that money for a long time to get off the ground. So if you have a new venture,
sure,
it's going to be a little while before it's on its own. It might be a little bit longer as well before
your money is locked up in their coffers, and that's okay.
It just might necessarily be a little bit of an illiquid investment.
Sure.
Very unlike putting money into any Fortune 500 company.
Sure.
Today. Okay, so that's the first thing. But what about that tax implication of being able, one day you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in this account and you want to take it out? Well, at that point, there's just this huge kind of mental block, like a psychological barrier of saying, I just can't handle the idea of getting hit with 45%. That's just is way too much.
Sure. And
I really understand that. I think that's just a real barrier, because you look back and said, well, if I could have just been taking money out all of these years, I wouldn't have been hit with as much. So I think that's a real problem. And in a particular regard, it stunts magnificence in a great way.
That's
if you
right.
do find at the end of your life that you have an extra $600,000 or whatever that you literally do not need, and you want to help build up a new chapel in your son's school, or you want to be able to build up something great in your city, you all of a sudden think, oh, I just don't have that money, or I just can't do it. I can't stomach the idea of it. And I don't want to complain about that. I think that's just hard to deal with. And so I would say that is one of these inherent flaws to the 401k.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just toss two other things. These are a little bit more theoretical and probably harder to embrace. But there's kind of two principles that the fathers and the scholastics unanimously agreed on. And the first was that if you want a profit for a profit's own sake, that's evil, bad, depraved, and needs to be confessed. If you have entered into business just for the sake of getting more money, then that is something that you actually have to go to the confession for. The reason why is because it comes back to this understanding that the world was a gift to all of us. Mm-hmm. And if you're getting more out than is your due, or more out than you need, that means that somebody else does need it. And that somebody else was originally gifted that. That's what the universal destination of all earthly goods is. This is the original cosmic gift of the universe that God gave to all of us. This is a really important point for the patristics and the scholastics, because that starts to reorientate everyone away from gain, glory, and honor and towards the lifting up the lowly. This is the great Christian revolution. But there's also another side where wealth without work is also another one of these economic sins, or product without labor is the way that you find a lot of the scholastics talking about it. And I think that the 401k falls prey to both of them. Now, you might say that with the whole product without labor idea, or wealth without work, that isn't that original and to the frame of the entire universe? Like, didn't God give us all of this and we didn't do anything for it? And the answer is yes, of course. But when it comes at the expense of somebody else, and namely that somebody, in a real sense, unwilling to give you a gift, did something to give you something, to give you that thing without you operating within it. Point is this. If you have something without doing anything for it, that means that somebody did something for it.
Sure.
That's my point. And that again is another frame of one of these economic sins for the patristics and the scholastics. And I think that the 401k falls prey to both of those. Is that we might say that this is for retirement, that I fear not being taken care of when I'm old, but you don't know what those dollars are doing. And that is a really scary, slippery slope to greed, where that you just expand into the infinite sum of accumulation, because you never really know what each dollar is for. And so you just get profit for profit's own sake at that point. And the second thing of the accumulation or of gaining something from somebody without doing labor for it, that starts to strip us away from the understanding of the dignity of work itself, of the dignity of others who are working. And so these are two just great temptations that I think are inherent to the 401k.
Now, what I want to talk about something specific to some 401k plans called vesting. And I think this is important because it has also application to all 401k plans. Now, vesting is just I think a problematic practice by which your company says, okay, we're going to take some of your salary, 5%, say, and put it into this 401k plan, and then we're going to match it with whatever, 5%, say. And you can have that if, and then the if is a little bit up to the company. But say if you work for us for 5 years, if you work for us for 10 years. And usually the way these plans work, as I understand it, is that it's incremental, right? So you get this much of the match if you work this long, you get more of it if you work this long. And when you really work for us for a long time, then you can have the full match, right? And this, I think this is just straight up wrong, right? Because what it's doing is buying loyalty. It's trying to buy loyalty to the company. And I think it's important to realize that I'm very suspicious of companies. So like if you're a company and you're telling me like as its CEO or whatever, like, at the end of the day, I'm in it for the good of all my employees. I always have to kind of add in my head, like insofar as they're profitable to me, right? Which maybe is cynical. Maybe it's too cynical. But it's important to say when we talk about companies wanting to take care of their employees in retirement, I think it's right to be a little bit suspicious and to ask, okay, sure, but in what way is companies doing that helping them, right? Helping the company itself perpetuate itself, its sort of drive for self-preservation and profit, because that's what's motivating from the get-go. And investing, in the practice of investing, you see it right here, right? Like they are giving a gift that's really a carrot on a stick. So the gift is the match, right? And then if you work for them this long, then, and the principle is that by having that, you have an incentive to ignore other problems with your company, right? So say it's year 4, right? And you're thinking, hey, these guys aren't really being just in all of their dealings with their clients, right? But if I can just stick it out for one more year, I get this thing, right? I get this good. Or it's year 9, okay? And you know what? I am not being treated with human dignity, right? They are just making me look at the same spreadsheet and they're not listening to me cry. Well, you work it out. Another year, you get even more money. So just stick it out, kid. You know what I'm saying? So it creates a way for them to have an incentive, but it's an incentivizing system, which is, as an incentive, it means that you fear the loss of the reward, even as much as you desire the reward itself. So it's this inauguration of the person into a fear-based economy. Once they dwell there, once they live there, then you have this ability to pull them into different kinds of actions that you want, right? And the problem is, I think the problem is pretty obvious, but it seems to me that what it allows companies to do is to describe this activity in totally moral terms. They sound like saints when they're describing their 401k plans, like taking care of our employees in their old age. And no one ever says like creating an inroad by which we can incentivize employees to stay despite flaws that they perceive in the company. Like, even though that's obviously just as true, that's not how it's presented. It's presented as like a moral gift to humanity that you can retire. So that, I think, is a huge problem. Now, some companies don't do this, right? I think probably the better ones don't. They don't indulge in this particular practice. However, the question I always have when it comes to 401k plans is just why, if it's all true that you want to take care of your employees, that you believe in them, and you want them to be loyal to you, and you want to show them that you care about them, and blah blah blah, why not just give them a raise? So at the end of the day, a company is calculating whether it can afford to match, right, to do these plans, right? It's looking at its spreadsheets. I say it as if it's like some monster. Like a particular person is looking at the spreadsheets and saying, all right, can we afford to do a 4% match on all these plans if we can sort of assume that it's going to be good for our employees and that they're going to want to stay with us because it's a benefit, blah, blah, blah. They're doing the math. They're doing what they can to predict, right? And then at the end of the day, they're saying, yes, it works for us to do this. Okay. Well, if you have the money, why not raise the salary? Why not give people more money that they can actually spend? Why put the raise in shackles, right? Like if they have to buy into a 401k plan, if you're like incentivizing this and you've decided that it's worthwhile, why only do it in such a mode, right, that it's limited in how they can use it? Of a new polity in the sense that the just price is ultimately founded on custom. And custom is
exactly
a law that's, it's not even a law. It's actually, Aquinas talks about it as the foundation of law. But it is simply descriptive of a people at peace. So it's not that there's some abstract just price that, through a lot of academic debate, you could finally settle on, hey, $5.99 is what this thing is worth, right? This is the assumption that, what underlies that kind of thinking is the idea that people are like inherently and thoroughly broken. Like they have to be, they can't figure anything out for themselves. Everything has to kind of come extrinsically. Whereas what generally happens is when a society is at peace, it tends to do peaceful things. So if we are at peace with each other and we have friendships, and within these friendships and within this peace, I want to sell you some bubble gum, right? Then I'm not going to break the peace by trying to charge you $20 for the bubble gum and insisting on that in any way, right? And in the meanwhile, you're going to not steal my bubble gum or try to get away with, 1 cent. Actually, that doesn't sound that bad for bubble gum, but I don't have a lower number. I can't split the penny here. So the point is that the assumption of the scholastics and the assumption of the church in general is actually shockingly optimistic, I think. It's shockingly optimistic, which is that the reason it puts all this faith in custom is because it just doesn't think that people are like inherently evil. It really does believe that people ultimately want the good. They want friendship. They want families and communities to remain intact. They want to flourish as human beings. And so if we look at a community, insofar as it really exists as a community, we can presume that it does so because they have real peace. They have real peaceful activities, and so customary activities, which can actually be guidelines for subsequent thought. Whereas I just don't even know now that we would even be able to think in terms of like, well, what's the customary price of anything? Because it's all just received really from, you don't. Anyway, we'll talk about that more later. But it does seem to me like rooting just price and custom is kind of radical in that it trusts people in a radical way.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, because if you find, obviously, the liberal theorists such as Locke and Hobbes, that they both presume scarcity, which is a big thing, but they also presume violence.
Right, that each is going to try to get as much as possible for as little as possible. Right, this is the assumption of human nature, that's what we do.
Right, and so Max Weber and our buddy von Mises actually state that they are explicitly Hobbesians in this regard.
Gotcha.
They believe that their anthropology, that Hobbes and Locke's anthropology, is the same anthropology that they hold, and that this is why we need the state to be able to threaten us with some sort of violence, that we are not going to kill our neighbor, but we're never going to be able to rid ourselves of our primary desire to have our own will fulfilled over and against the will of our neighbor. And so so they say that this is the competition of the free market. This is why we have a profit motive, because we have this desire to fulfill our own will over and against the good of our neighbor. And that the only reason why it can be competitive within a market rather than bloody in a field as Cain and Abel had it was because the state was threatening us to mitigate just how competitive we were going to be.
I mean, really, it's like the demonic opposite of the Catholic Church's teaching, in the sense that where the church presumes peace and so can look to custom to set a price, Hobbes presumes violence. Right. And so there is no customary price. There's simply the price that's won, right? Like the price that has been, in the end, enforced by the state.
Threatened by greed.
Totally. And the joke's on the greedy people.
It's totally on the greedy
because the people that aren't greedy end up with things and happiness.
Not necessarily.
Well, that's true. They're usually deprived and oppressed. But
or they're just prodigals and they end up in pigsties.
Well, that happens too, I suppose. Yeah. Well, here's what I have to say. There are many nuances one could give, but podcasting isn't the place for nuances. I say that the big problem with greed is that it is a real you're impoverished because you have abstract power, but you fear more than anything the loss of that abstract power for the sake of activity, for something actual. Mm-hmm. And that is a difficult and sad way to live.
It is.
Yeah.
There's nothing more to say about that. Well, except for this. St. Thomas says that the way out of this is through liberality. Oh, totally. Because liberality is about knowing how to use money well.
Yeah.
Which is the exact opposite of greed, where you don't know what money's for. And so part of the way that we just start to rehabituate ourselves out of this is by figuring out how to spend money for actual things really well, instead of living in our abstractive fiction of I just must always accumulate. Not even always accumulate. I just can't spend.
Totally.
And I think that just, if fear takes over, never get to live. It's no fun. Does our society do this?
Some people.
Yeah, this one's tough, actually.
I think that, I mean, you asked the question, I mean, like, obviously, how do I put it? It's hard to say because our wealthy have accumulated most of the wealth. And so while you can point to them and say, see, they have an apparently limitless drive for acquisition, it's difficult to say whether everyone else does because most people don't have the capacity. Now, there's the famous Steinbeck quote, right? That there are no poor in America, only temporarily embarrassed millionaires. And I think, in my experience, it's a very true observation, right? That like people view themselves as just failed Jeff Bezos. Like, so their poverty, even their socialism sometimes is just like an act by which they wish that they could get as much money as they could possibly get. They just don't happen to get it because of their lack of power or just fortune, you know?
Yeah.
So they have no change of heart. Really, they are just a greedy person frustrated in the ends of greed, which I guess seems kind of worse, materially speaking, although there's probably more opportunities for conversion where you could like sit back and be like, you know what, this greed ain't get me anywhere.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's true of everyone, right? Because I've just met many people who just aren't greedy, who are content, whose wealth is in children and places and like particular relations, and in the glory that comes with living together in Christian life. Maybe I've got shutters on or blinders on, but that seems like certainly more people than billionaires. And so the idea that we're going to somehow form intentional communities, Christian communities, without dealing with money and without actively having a plan for kind of taking ourselves off the life support machine of the money economy, I think is foolish.
Yeah.
And I think that people often get very, I don't know what the word is. They want common sense to simply be like, well, money is this other thing, so we don't touch that. We just make sure that we're being good and moral and virtuous, but money has nothing to do with it, right? Whereas it seems to me obvious that if Christians don't change how they work with money and what they do with money, then they're never going to have the Christian community that they so fervently desire.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about it this way. One of the things that we've said is that, you know, it's probably wrong to have blind investments. And it's almost certainly wrong in most cases to just presume that your money should make more money. And there's no way in heck that our current system of planning for the retirements of Catholics and priests on the basis of investing in Amazon and Google is good. That's a no-no. That's bad. But just think about it in terms of community. Like if a Christian people are a finite people, we only have so much energy. We only have so much, you know, oomph to us. We're worldly, right?
We're finite.
We are.
Yeah. We got our limitations.
Yes. Christ doesn't. We do. And he's working through us, thank goodness. So when we take our money and give it to the world to then run, which is what we're doing, we have that much less power to orientate towards building up particular communities here.
Yeah.
I mean, the 401k makes this really obvious in the sense that you actually say no to having money until a later time in life. But that later time in life is precisely the time when you can assume that the community has been most established already. What do we do with the elderly? I mean, ultimately, when we think about retirement, we think about, okay, these people they're no longer the thing that's shaping the community. They're no longer the thing that's definitely orientating the particularities of what the city is going to look like. They're the people that are being served, that are enjoying in some way their rest from their labors. So the idea that we can just not use Christian money and then give it to Christians later, having made investments in the world, and somehow this is going to lead to radical Christian communities, I mean, I think it's just foolish.
Yeah, it is. I think it's consequentialist, and I think it's something that we need to sit down and realize is that like the whole consequentialist thesis is I want X in outcome and I want to get there no matter what it takes. But St. Paul brings this up in Romans when he says, let us do ill that good might come. The only ways that we ever could get to good is by having good, is by doing good.
Right.
That the means have to be good in order to have a good outcome. Well, everybody, thanks so much for spending these last
Any last
31
words?
weeks. I don't really have too many last words. I think we've talked so much, but I guess the last thing that I would say is that we're actively converting in all of this as well.
Sure.
We were thinking about all these things that we mentioned for some time, trying to live them out for some time as well, finding peace and joy in them as we have been trying to instantiate these principles in our lives. But please continue to pray for us as we do. And we take joy in praying for those who've asked for our prayers, and we gladly do so. So, but let's be in union of that in prayer.
Yep.
Last words?
That's
it? Bye.
It's been great. Sorry for not knowing anything but having a podcast, but you can't blame me because everyone does it these days. So